as you mostly know, this is normally hosted by Timothy Summers. He is unable to make it today, unfortunately, but I did want to remind everybody he is the leader of this wonderful monthly event and is the executive director for UTO. And I would like to introduce our speaker of the day, Peter Romness, the cybersecurity principal of Cisco. Peter?
Well, thank you very much. So when I talked to Tim about this presentation, he said, well, I guess I should tell you what I do. My name is Peter Romness. I work in the CTO office at Cisco in our public sector organization. I like to say that I work with customers that don't buy anything. And that means that I work with organizations that set policy and maybe even have influence on laws and things like that. So people that are not necessarily going to buy anything today or tomorrow or even in the near future, but have influence and would be interested in what Cisco has to offer for cybersecurity. I also go around all over the country talking to C-level cybersecurity people. So I get a great view of what they're doing and what's going on in the industry. I also speak at conferences and to groups. Right now during the COVID-19 pandemic, it's really nice to talk to a group. And so thank you for coming today. So when talking to Tim, he said, you know, Peter, you see a lot of what's going on out there for cybersecurity. How about if you kind of tell us what you see? Give us a view of what you're seeing. So I called this speech a view from the bleachers. Come on. So I wanted to start off with a few observations. First off, cybersecurity is something that nobody likes to invest in. But from what I've seen over and over again, it is much cheaper to invest before a breach than to have to clean up afterwards. It is so common after a breach, oftentimes one that you might hear about in the news, that it's one of our customers that we've been trying to get to implement some of our solutions. They're hemming and hawing and there's not money. And then all of a sudden they get breached, they're in the news, and money is almost being thrown at us, and we can't get in there fast enough. And usually at that point, they want to buy a whole suite of our products. So it's much better to do it on the front end, to have a plan, to do it in a systematic way. The next thing that I really want to highlight, and I'll be talking about this a little bit more today, is that cybersecurity is about risk management. Nobody can afford to have perfect cybersecurity. Even some of the most well-funded government secret organizations that we work with can't afford everything that they want to do. The next thing is you need to have your bases covered. As somebody who either runs a business, runs the security of a business, or has anything to do with making sure that a business is successful, needs to know what to do to make sure that they're doing what they need to do for cybersecurity. I'm going to talk about what I call best practices and all of the help that's out there for us to know, if I'm a cybersecurity person, what do I need to do? The next is that even with all of these best practices, and oftentimes there are laws that you have to follow. So if you're a health organization, you have to follow what the HIPAA law, Health Insurance Portability and Privacy Act. And in other organizations, if you take credit cards, you have to have a PCI certification. And I recommend highly the NIST cybersecurity framework, which I'll talk about a little bit more today. The thing that I've seen, though, is that you can go through and check off all the boxes, but compliancy does not get you security. Compliancy is kind of the baseline. It helps you know what you need to do. The next thing that I'd love to talk about, and we're seeing this throughout the country in every size organization, is that it's so hard to keep up now in business. And in large organizations that have an outward facing, they're getting hit with tons of attacks, cybersecurity attacks. And so many that they can't investigate them all and they can't repair them all. And that's if they see them. And then the final thing that I want to stress to everybody is that there is a solution that's reasonable for every size business. And it's just a matter of finding the right thing and implementing it and then living by it. Okay, so those are my observations. That leads into my agenda for the day. Which I'd love to talk about. So with the COVID-19 pandemic, there have been a lot of things happening. I'm going to focus and tell you what we are seeing from Cisco that the attackers are doing. I talked about risk management. I'm going to go into what that is, how that works. I'm going to then talk about some best practices, primarily the NIST cybersecurity framework. I'll then talk about zero trust, tell you how it works, tell you what it is. Then I'm going to talk about how you go about not being overwhelmed, and that's with an architectural approach to cybersecurity. And finally, I'm going to talk about getting started. Okay, so if that's okay with everybody, I'm going to get started. Okay, so with the pandemic, a lot of things have changed. People are working remotely now, and people are very attuned to what is going on in the world. The words COVID-19, pandemic, things like that, people are aware of. And that has not gone unnoticed by attackers. So bad actors are definitely trying to take advantage of this situation. Just like almost any world event, we see the attackers use that as another way to get into an organization. Famous quote, I'd heard it, never let a good crisis go to waste. That was first, I heard it was attributed to Mark Twain, then to Winston Churchill, but the only place I could really find someone who said it was Rahm Emanuel, who was the past mayor of Chicago and the White House chief of staff. But that's definitely what's going on with the bad actors. Now, how do we know this? Well, Cisco has the largest cybersecurity intelligence organization outside government in the world. And we've noticed that things have gotten much busier with the attack vector, with the attackers. So you can see, and this is just up until about March 19th, I believe, but from the time that the World Health Organization labeled COVID-19 a pandemic until March 19th, we can see all kinds of things that increased. So there's a 25% increase in total traffic on the internet. Of that, it was a 3.5 times greater malware traffic. And of course, the most common way for bad guys to get into your environment and attack you is using phishing. Over 80% of all attacks start with phishing, and we saw that increase by almost 2%. And then botnet, this is when attackers use other people's machines and take control of them and turn them into a virtual robot that they control from afar. Botnet traffic increased 2.5 times. Now, those are all ways that people deliver attacks. And one of the most common attacks is ransomware. And ransomware attacks increased 2 times during this period. So it's really increasing. So just as another example, on February 19th, there were 560 queries made on the internet that had to about 8,000 domains that had the words either Corona or COVID. By March 19th, that had increased to 11 million requests with 47. So from 560K to 11 million, and from 8,000 domains to 47,000 domains registered with names that had maybe COVID or Corona. And then by April 3rd, we're seeing 9 million requests and 114,000 domains. So rapid growth in all of the things that attackers use in order to go after organizations. And this particular data is from Krebs Security. If you don't follow Krebs, a great person to follow. His website is krebsonsecurity.com. But basically, this shows the number of new domain requests. So somebody requesting a web address that has coronavirus or COVID or something like that in the domain name. And just, you can see the volume of this, up to 5,000 requests per day. So just the number that are being generated. Now, not all these are bad, but most of them are. And what Cisco has seen from our research, again, is that the most popular names for these domains have just what you would expect. Things like Wuhan, lab, test, self-test, etc. And just to give an example of how these domains can be popular, corona-virus-map is a bad URL. Do not try and go there. And in fact, if I were to try and go there, I wouldn't be allowed to by Cisco policy and things like that. But you can see the number of times that people have been hitting on that domain during this time. So this is a known bad domain. It goes from almost no hits, where it didn't exist, so exactly no hits. It was created on March 11th, and automatically it had this spike. Then organizations like Cisco and some of the others around there started blocking those domains. And so we're just seeing people who aren't protected that are hitting that after there. So very bad thing to do. Do not go to this domain. Don't try this at home, folks. Okay. And then just to show you how easy it is to get a domain like this, here's a frame shot from GoDaddy showing, you can get this COVID-19-Wuhan.com, and it is for sale. Okay. Now, an example of some of these sites. This is a coronavirus map. It looks exactly like the Johns Hopkins University map that is a good site to go to, but it is a fully bad site. If you click on that map, or if you click to go to that map, you will get malware attempted to be downloaded onto your computer. Okay, so please do not go there. And then finally, with the COVID-19, our research organization is named Talos. They see 3 ways that people are trying to take advantage of this pandemic. First, they're using the words COVID and pandemic and things like that in malware and phishing campaigns. Okay, so using the awareness of the titles to get people to click on things. Oftentimes, they'll send an email that says information on COVID-19 in your area. Log in to read this important information, or you may have been in contact with somebody. So using the fear to get someone to click on something. They're also using it to attack this new work at home and the new attack surfaces in order to go after organizations to try and steal research and related work to the COVID-19, or just to steal intellectual property in general or personal information, because they know that people are working from home and may be distracted or may not have the normal defenses. Finally, they're using the COVID-19 to either commit fraud, so using the actual news to scare people and get them to open up their pocketbooks, or to spread disinformation about the disease, maybe to sell bad products. Okay, so that's kind of what's going on with COVID-19. The main thing I would like to point out there is that almost any world event can cause this type of reaction. So we as people who are trying to defend against this and people who are trying to live a good, decent life need to be aware of it and avoid getting caught. Okay, so let me move on to more of the topics that I spend a lot of time talking about. And it gets to this question, are we secure? And this may be a question that your family asks you. It may be a question you're asking yourself. It may be a question that your boss asks you. So if you're a security person, there's an old joke that your boss asks you this question, are we secure? And you can say no and be fired right immediately, or you can say yes and be fired when there is a breach. So the problem with this answer is that there isn't a good answer. Probably the right answer would be, we have made the right decisions to be as secure as we can be, given the resources we've allocated. So you're never going to be 100% perfect, but you have to make choices about what you're going to do. And that gets to what I said earlier about cybersecurity being a risk question, okay? And I love to use this analogy where I'm buying a used Acura. This car I just bought it for $6,500. And I don't know if you could get insurance for these prices in Arizona, but I know here in the Washington, D.C. area, I cannot match these prices, but it's good to dream. So if I want to get just liability insurance for my car, that's $200 a year. And that's all I'm required to have. But let's say I want to get comprehensive collision insurance. That adds to the price. It gives me more protection. But if I decide that, I can afford to take the risk of losing $6,500 worth of car, then I don't have to pay the extra $400 a year. So very much like that, that is the type of question and decision process that people need to go through in order to make cybersecurity decisions. You'll never have enough money. You'll never have enough time. You need to make these decisions. And so, of course, that leads to the question, okay, so how do I make these decisions? How do I decide that I've done enough? How do I know that I've checked all the boxes and I've covered everything that I need to cover? And that's a hard thing to do because there's so much. So what's happened is that there have been all of these, what I call frameworks, approaches, or best practices that have been created. You may have heard of some of these. The most common one is the NIST Cybersecurity Framework. There's also Zero Trust. These are two that I'm going to talk about today. I'm also going to mention CARTA. I'm going to mention the NIST Risk Management Framework. And I've already mentioned PCI and HIPAA. But all of these were created in order to make it so that people can say, here's a list of things, or here's certifications that I have to do in order to cover my bases. Now, bear in mind, the other thing I said earlier is that compliance does not get you security. It's a baseline. So security is going that extra step, thinking about how an attacker may want to attack you, and then doing what's appropriate to protect your organization. But these things, these different framework can help you to decide what those things are. Now today I'm going to focus on two of these, the cybersecurity framework and Zero Trust. Okay, so let's jump right in. So the NIST Cybersecurity Framework was created in 2014, I believe, after some very big breaches. It was originally created to cover critical infrastructure, and it was created by the National Institute of Standards and Technology. Now, I don't know if you have heard of the National Institutes of Standards and Technologies, or NIST, but they put out recommendations for all kinds of industries in order to standardize different measurements or practices or things like that. One of their organizations is their computer, and then within their computer organization is the Computer Security Organization. And that's the organization that put together the NIST Cybersecurity Framework. The cool thing about the framework is that it is voluntary. And within 2 years of it being introduced and being completely voluntary, over half of the organizations in the United States were using it in one form or another. That's because it's very nicely organized, it's prioritized, it's one of these nice checklists that people can use. It's also done in a tiered format, meaning that you can go about as deep as you can understand into it. So as an example, a manager in an organization would start at the core, which is identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. And then that gets more detailed as you go into it, and I'll show you how that's I'm going to show you how that works. But as a CEO of a corporation or a secretary of a government organization, I could say to my people, how are we doing on identify? And then, you know, they would have gone much deeper, but all I got to do is worry about identify. So it allows you to prioritize. And it gives this common language so that everybody can talk about it within an organization. But say I'm a practitioner in the organization, I'm talking to some of my peers. I have a common language to talk to them about it also. So even though it was created for Internet of Things and the critical infrastructure, it is being used for all parts of IT security now. Okay, so it's broken into 3 parts. The core framework is the list of what you should be doing and how to do it, and references and things like that. And that allows you to assess where you are. So you use that core framework, and then you assign your own maturity level to that. Are you a beginner and doing the basics, or is this a normal practice in your organization, which would be, you'd give yourself a 4 grade. And then you create a profile of where you are, you create a profile of where you would like to be, and it allows you to create an action plan to get there. Okay, so I'm going to go into the core really quickly just to give you an idea. And most people are really afraid of this, so I really want to get rid of people being afraid of the core of the cybersecurity framework. And normally when people talk about NIST cybersecurity framework, the core is what they're talking about. So at the very top of the core is the functions, which were those identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. The next step down is categories, which are activities that you should be doing. Then below that is subcategories, and below that is references. I'm not going to go into detail, but I kind of want to show you an example. So again, the function is part of this identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. So in this case, identify. And then identify has 5 categories. So identify, access management, asset management, IDAM, is know what is in your environment. So what data, what people, what devices, what systems, what apps are running. You know, that is the asset management. Those are your assets. And then there's business environment, governance, and things like that. Okay, so that is the top level. And that would be maybe a functional manager's job to get to that level. When you go to the next level, you have subcategories. And so identity, asset management, number 1 is the physical devices and systems in your organization need to be inventoried. Okay, so that's pretty easy, and maybe a actual practitioner, the person who has to set this stuff up and make sure it's running well, would know it at this level. And finally, if you want to compare it to other best practices or have a reference of how to do these things, then they give informative references. So it's you know, I don't ever recommend anybody read this document for pleasure. They should read it as something to put them to sleep at night, or as something as a reference, as I just showed you how to use it. So, you know, if I want to use, I figure out what to do for identify, asset management, physical device inventory, I can then go look at other NIST standards or other international standards or other best practices. So I hope that helps. I am a big proponent of the NIST cybersecurity framework. I work with NIST probably about 1/3 of my time. I'm working with NIST on various products. You know, you folks are all on the call today because you're a friend or affiliated with ASU, a nice university with a great environment. That's kind of what NIST is like when you go to one of their organizations. It's a very collegial, university-like atmosphere, and they put out great documents. Now, one thing that most people don't know is that NIST is a part of the Department of Commerce. And it's like, why would someone putting out standards and checklists and things like that be part of the Department of Standards? Well, Department of Commerce. Well, because if you have standards, it makes it easier for business to move forward. You've probably heard in the news many times that uncertainty is not good for business. And people who are trying to plan for business need certainty. So that's what these standards and these policies help, is they help to standardize things, give certainty, give common language, allow people to make these risk-based decisions, and to leverage what other people are doing and share what they're doing. So I'm a big proponent of the NIST cybersecurity framework. Okay. Erin, are there any questions on the NIST cybersecurity framework or anything I've talked about so far?
None put in the chat yet. So
okay.
We're looking good.
Okay, I'm going to move on to the next topic, and it is zero trust. Now, zero trust has been in the news tremendously lately. And the one thing that I always like to highlight with zero trust is it's not something you buy. It is a way of thinking about things. It's almost a lifestyle. So I can still go and meet some of these other criteria or best practices. I can do the whole NIST cybersecurity framework. But if I do it with zero trust in mind, I can accomplish both. Okay, so to talk about zero trust, I want to give you a little bit of history. In 2004, there was an organization made up of CIOs and CISOs, mainly in Europe, and they were looking at the state of the information technology environment and saying, we no longer have organizations that are completely walled off from the world. We don't have the ability to put a perimeter around our organization, or a cybersecurity perimeter, where once you get in with a username and password, you can get to everything, right? So there's no longer this perimeter, and they called this problem deperimeterization. It's a very hard thing to say. It didn't take off very much, but it was the earliest model that was going on with this. In 2010, a guy named John Kindervag, who is a Forrester consultant, looked at this same issue and said, well, I'm going to call this zero trust, because the way to solve this is to not trust anything. It's to decide that any of the assets in my organization, and an asset would be my people, my devices, my applications, my data. So all of any of the people or devices, data, or applications is my assets. And I'm going to assume that all of them are connected directly to the internet. Okay, so internet bad, this wild west where anybody can steal. And I'm going to not trust anybody implicitly. Okay, so that's not going to work completely, because if I don't trust anybody, I'm not going to let anybody anywhere. So it becomes an idea that a thing or a person or data, in order to be on the network, needs to earn trust. Okay, so zero trust. About that time, there were some other big breaches, and in 2014, Google decided that they were going to build their whole network security infrastructure around zero trust, and they named their example BeyondCorp. So they built their whole organization. They put out 6 great white papers on how they did it, and I recommend you read them if you're interested. They were like the first example of someone doing zero trust. In 2017, John Kindervag had left Forrester, and a new person took over named Chase Cunningham, and he created Zero Trust Extended. He recognized that there were things missing in Zero Trust, and he added them and created Zero Trust Extended. About the same time, Gartner decided that they didn't want Forrester making all the money doing this consulting, and they wanted some of it, so they created Continuous Adaptive Risk and Trust Assessment called CARTA. And that is very similar to Zero Trust, but it adds something that Zero Trust did not have, which was taking into account threats. The attackers who were trying to come at an organization. So they looked at it as both, establishing trust and looking out for threats. And of course, ZTX incorporated much of that. And so today, it's pretty much known as Zero Trust architecture. It's accepted very widely in the industry. It's one of the hottest topics, and it's taking off. NIST has created a draft 800, special publication 800-207, where they talk about zero trust. Okay, so let's talk about what zero trust is. Zero trust, again, was popularized by Forrester. It started out as zero trust and is now Zero Trust Extended. It is a strategy. It is not a thing you buy. It is based upon the idea of least privilege, but not really. It's more like earn privilege before you can get anywhere. And it's to, again, address this perimeterless environment. One of the people that I work with a lot in Cisco talks about the reason Zero Trust took off is because perimeterless was too hard to say. And there's probably a lot of merit in that. But again, it assumes all environments are hostile, and so nobody, no thing, no data, no device is going to get privilege until they have proven that they can be trusted. And so it's the idea that before you get access to something, so say it's me trying to get into some corporate data that Cisco has, and if it's the most critical data, I would probably have to be on a machine that's been vetted by Cisco. So, it takes that into account when it does this trust decision. It would have to be me on a machine. The machine I'm on has to have the latest and up-to-date software, so there are no bugs. And I need to use multi-factor authentication to get into it. And so if I meet all of those criteria, then I can get to that asset. And it's the way that that Zero Trust should work is that each access decision, so each person or thing that wants to get somewhere else in your environment, has to be checked and the trust proven. And it has to be continually proven. And if something happens to break that trust, then it has to automatically cut off that connection. So that's what Zero Trust means. It means earn trust, then you get to the appropriate assets that you or your device needs to get to. Okay, and this diagram on the bottom kind of shows how it works. It's the idea of people, devices, network, and workloads have to be trusted. And all of that is based on a foundation of automation and the ability of a orchestrated environment in order to management. Because if you think about it, all of these different trust decisions have to be made. And if a person had to be involved in it, if there had to be manual decisions made, there's no way that it could be kept up with. And then when you add the fact that threats may be coming in and that you have to take action on those, and there are a lot of threats, it really needs to be automated, okay? The whole idea is to protect intellectual property, to protect your data. Okay. So, you know, just to simplify it a little bit, it gets down to this idea of continuous trust, right? So very simple. You have to establish the trust of every device and identity that is accessing anything in your environment. And then you have to take into account this continuous threat detection. Okay, so that is kind of, you know, the overview of zero trust. And that gets to, okay, so how do I implement this? What does a zero trust environment look like? And so I have a quick diagram here. And on the right are many of the devices that are needed in order, or many of the activities that have to happen in order to protect an enterprise's environment. Okay, so cloud access security. If your data is in the cloud, you have to be able to protect all of it there. Email security. How do you protect your people from getting phishing emails and things like that? And I can go around this circle and talk about all of the different ways that attackers will try to attack and that we need to protect against. And so some of these functions are needed in almost any environment. And that is kind of the environment that most large organizations have. And then again, for a smaller organization, based on your budget, you need to figure out what you can have here and what will give you the most risk abatement for the dollars spent. So how can you make these risk-based decisions? But regardless of this, an integrated environment is needed where if there is a threat, that if one device sees a threat, that it tells all the other ones, and that all of those devices are constantly updated if there's a new threat that's introduced anywhere in the world. The whole idea of event visibility, how quickly can you see something, and if you have multiple devices seeing parts of it, can you connect all of those together? And when it comes to investigate or to figure out what happened to you, do you have the context in order to do it? And then the most important thing for almost every organization is this automated policy that allows you to react in real time and with very little manpower. So that's kind of what we really focus on when we start talking about it. If you look at what a modern security architecture looks like, it's this whole idea that we need to protect anywhere our people, our devices, or our data is stored. So that's in the network, and that network includes your cloud applications and your data in the clouds. It includes all of the endpoints, so that it may be a thermostat, it may be a printer or a camera, or it may be a mainframe computer. But those may be some of the devices that are on your network. And then, you know, there are micro apps and all of the different applications and data that has to be protected. Okay. Now we talked about trust. Okay, so this continuous trust verification. So it's not just username and password. It's you really need, and I'm going to talk about bang for the buck a little bit more, but One of the biggest bang for the buck things that anybody can do is dual factor authentication. So it's not just username and password anymore, but it's another factor, maybe an email, maybe a token or something like that. But that is critical. But it's also, what time of day is it? Who is the person? What is their duty in the organization? Do they need access to specific devices? So it's this continuous trust and verification of identity. And then it's also threat. Are you protected from the known threats? Meaning, the things that have been out there forever. And about 95% of all attacks are done with threats or vulnerabilities that have been known for over a year. So it's not just the brand new threats that have not been known before. It's the ones that have been out there that people just don't have time to take care of. So the need for comprehensive and updated threat intelligence into your organization is critical. And finally, when something happens, is it automated? If you have the desire, can you investigate? Can you detect what's going on to stop it? Can you investigate to see what it is? And then can you get rid of it quickly? And many smaller organizations, they really just want to have the threats detected and blocked. They really don't care about investigating, but the larger organizations do. And in large organizations where they're not just a single vendor's products, there has to be an ability for all these products to work together. And of course, there's all kinds of different technology feeds that can be placed in. Okay, so that's kind of the modern cybersecurity architecture. The next thing most people ask me is, okay, how do I do this? How do I get started? So, and I've seen this in many government programs, and in Zero Trust, a lot of the consultants go about this in almost the same way. So if you talk to anybody, the first thing that you need to do to start to get a handle on your security, and this is for Zero Trust or for almost anything you want to do, is you need to know what you have. You need to know the users and devices on your network. You have to know, and IoT, for those who don't know, that's Internet of Things. That's all of the devices, sensors, cameras, thermostats, things like that that might be on your network. And about the different applications that are running on your network. So it's the idea of knowing what you have. The next thing that you need to do is that you need to start applying the ability to let things happen or not in your environment. So determine who and what gets access to the different parts of your organization and being able to control that. And the whole idea is the more you can segment that, the better you're protected. So if one workstation in my organization, goes to Starbucks and finds maybe a thumb drive and plugs it in and gets malware, as soon as that device connects to my network, I want to be able to say, okay, it's Peter on his laptop, and he just connected from Starbucks, and he just put a thumb drive in, and I need to cut off his access immediately. But I don't want to cut off everybody's access. I just want to cut off his access. Or maybe I want to just cut off part of his access. So the more you can segment that network access and app and data control, the better you're off. And then the final step is this idea of being able to see what is going on in your environment, know what's going, know what normal looks like, so that when something abnormal happens, you can detect it. Know about when a threat gets into your organization and be able to take response to it. So that's kind of the whole step by step, and it can be as complicated as your organization needs it to be. Okay. So Cisco has all kinds of security tools, and we work with the largest organizations in the world. And I used to go around the country talking about how you need to, have this architectural approach that I just showed you how it works. And you need to get it and set it up and get it rolling. But I have found, and Cisco has found over the last couple of years, that oftentimes that's not what people want to do. They want to look at solutions that can help them quickly, with this idea in mind that eventually they want to get to a place where they can cover everything. So we've started looking at real world protection. How effective is something? How can it help them, help our customers? We look for return on investment and time to value. So how easy can our customers implement something, and how much are they going to get as far as bang for the buck? I mentioned multi-factor authentication earlier. That's something that we have that customers can set up usually in an afternoon, even on the largest networks. And it is something that takes this 80% of all threats getting in through email and makes it much harder for the bad guys to get in. In fact, many malware scripts will not even attack an organization if they notice that it has multi-factor authentication. So that is something that is very quick time to value and a very good bang for the buck or return on investment. So we've been focusing on that. We've also been focusing on visibility, knowing what's going on in our environment. And this is the whole environment, not just my data center and my network. It's any place that my organization has data or people. We need to know what's going on. And then we also focus on making it easy to manage all of this. So we've spent tons of time and money bringing things together into single management consoles and making things easy to automate and easy to investigate. And then finally, the thing that I talk to a lot of people about is appropriateness. And all of the things I talked about today fit into this appropriateness. So making these risk-based decisions, making the right choices for your organization. Okay. Now, oftentimes I don't want to scare people. The biggest organizations buy all of this equipment for themselves. They're on premise and they buy some cloud products, they buy some devices that they put in their own data center. They usually have security teams to manage them, and they spend a good bit of money on them. These are the largest organizations. At the other end is the ability for smaller organizations, or for organizations with small branches, where you can get cloud managed devices. So these would be fairly simple devices to operate that are oftentimes available with monthly billing. And all of the management is done via web interface. And so it's very easy to deploy and very easy to manage. As an example, Cisco has this product line called Meraki, which has wireless access points and security devices. And all of the wireless access points and they also have cameras if you want to do security, physical security with cameras, but it's all managed via the web. So it's very easy to do. All of the setup is automated and very common. And as an example, the security device has many of the features of our more expensive stuff already built in and easy to manage. And then in the middle, mid-sized organizations and many small organizations will just outsource all of their security to a cloud security broker or cloud security company called Security as a Service. So that's, there's all kinds of different ways. There's something for everyone. And, oftentimes it just takes talking to the, getting appropriate advice if you don't know how to get started. And of course, all of my competitors and Cisco are happy to help you. So with that, that is my presentation. Cisco, oftentimes people don't know that we have security products. They think of us as phones and internet. We are one of the biggest security companies in the world. Actually, we are the biggest in the world. And if you would like to contact me, my email is right here, promness@cisco.com. So with that, does anybody have any questions? Let's not be shy.
I don't have any in the chat, but I would love for someone to just jump out and say something.
Okay.
Hey, Peter, this is Chris Richardson. I'm with the issue.
Chris.
You started off with some observations, and you made a statement that you don't get security with compliancy, which I also kind of correlate with kind of governance.
Yes.
You get a baseline. Can you, I was kind of hoping you'd go into that a little more in what you shared here, because I think sometimes that is a unique balancing act where you'll get a governance or compliance directive that I think people that then produce them believe security then will be the result.
And that is an unbelievable observation. And I'll take it from what you said. The people who do create them expect that to be the result. But in reality, what we've seen over the years is that it's not the result. People go through, they meet the checklist that's created by these compliances or whatever, and then they move on and forget about it. They don't pay attention to it. So it's more than just checking these things off. And that's why I really like the NIST cybersecurity framework and Zero Trust combined, because it gets people thinking about security and gets them into a mindset of security. And it's not just going in and saying, I meet this criteria. It's, I meet this criteria. I need to keep doing these things. And here's why it's important. And here's how I am going to make sure that I accomplish these goals, rather than just checking off the box that I got to check.
Have you seen a good example of an integrated Zero Trust governance and compliancy process that we could use as a starting point?
We are starting to see that. And here's one that not many people would expect me to say. We're seeing this in several federal government agencies at this point. And the CIO of the federal government is putting things into place to try and make all of this happen. We're seeing the federal government, the different agencies have assigned chief information security officers, and their attitudes are the right way for this. And they have actually created a program called Continuous Diagnostics and Mitigation that, they're doing, they're doing the process that I talked to you about, which is know who and what's on your network, know what is going on in your network, and then know how to protect your network. So that's kind of the process they've taken. And we're seeing some shining lights within the federal government. I probably am not, I make it a practice of not talking about specific customers on mass events, but we're seeing some agencies doing that well. I also, Notre Dame.
Can you make introductions outside of mass events that
Yes.
connect? I mean,
Yes.
because I'm sure Aaron can connect. We had an interesting discussion that our security team brought forward to a leadership architecture review. We had exactly on this topic is security by design, security architecture, and zero trust. And it'd be great to get that team to talk to this said public sector entity. That'd be nice.
Yes, and in your field, Notre Dame has done a good job with the NIST cybersecurity framework and putting that into action.
Yeah, Notre Dame helped us way back when kind of consult from a network and infrastructure perspective about our move to the cloud. And separately, I met one of their key security leaders, and I was impressed. So that'd be a great additional connection today, because that was years ago. That was probably 3 years ago we had that connection. And I don't think we've followed up with Notre Dame recently. And
you know what? You guys do a really good job at ASU. You're oftentimes held up inside Cisco as one of the more progressive customers around cybersecurity.
Oh no, but I mean, in our path to make sure it's as integrated as possible, I think we're open to ideas, and it's probably smart to connect with this public sector company as well as reinitiate with Notre Dame. I don't think since Timothy has been here that we have necessarily talked to Notre Dame. I don't know, maybe it's happened that I'm not aware, but that'd be great.
Thank you. Okay, can we have any easier questions, please? I hope you guys are laughing on mute. I see how Stephen Colbert feels every night.
I was laughing. I thought it was funny.
Aaron's thinking about how to embed a laughter addition to Zoom sessions so that it sounds like everyone is.
I'm just going to get one of those little machines and push the button and have the fake laughter all the time.
You get your own laughter, you get to create your own. That's much better. Like, oh,
that's what
I have an easy
yeah,
button
exactly.
I can press. But...
There you go. It's not the same as laughter when you're giving jokes, though, Peter.
That's true.
Yeah.
I think I might have a question to the automation. You have to have the automation to remediate. And so I guess I'm curious, does that usually come out of infrastructure or do we have security teams doing that automation? And that maybe it's a stupid question, I don't know, but.
Well, in the past, it's always been, vendors like Cisco and all our competitors have basically thrown products at our customers and said, you do it. And that really doesn't work so well. And so, what's going on now is automation is happening in the industry. I know at Cisco, we've spent tons of money integrating all our products and making things happen in an automated fashion. We're even introducing a new platform called SecureX that really takes that automation to the next level. So it is where the industry is heading. Hello?
That was fine. I don't know how to react to that. That sounds fine to me. Thanks.
Yeah, okay.
One more I have, just zero trust in general. What do you think? I mean, you showed the timeline where it's evolving, and from the literature, it seems like there's still a long way to go to be a pervasive, resounding success. Why do you think that is? Like, I mean, and as you're thinking, it sure seems like it's such a broad view with so many kind of potentially false positives, but that's just, this is not my area of expertise per se. But I don't know, thoughts on what
some of this gets back to your original question about who's doing it well, and we're seeing a lot of people starting it, And NIST just got a hold of it, and they're on they're writing their third draft of their special publication 800-207 about zero trust, where they're trying to define it. I personally prefer not to define it real carefully. I see it as a way of thinking, almost a religion, almost a cult. No, probably cult's not the right thing, but it's a way of thinking. It's a journey, not necessarily a destination. So it's this idea of thinking about, how do I make sure that only the appropriate assets are exposed to the appropriate devices or people all the time, anytime, anywhere. And any device or any modification you do to your environment should take that into account. So it's kind of thing that you're never done with. It's something that you're always thinking about as you move forward, and with those goals in mind. Okay. So it's almost like explaining, world peace or something like that. All right. Erin, do you want to talk about this slide?
Of course I do. So thank you all. Today was great. We have another one next month. It's always the third Wednesday of the month. We are going to be excited to see you all again on June 17th. We are going to have Rob Silverberg, the CTO for Digital Communities at Dell, join us. So make sure to look out for those announcements coming up. Is there another one after that, Peter?
Yes, there is.
All right.
If I can make my mouse work, here you go.
And as always, we are on the meetup. Please join the group and check us out there. Thanks again, Peter. That was fantastic. I really enjoyed your talk. It was a good day.
Really interesting
Yeah,
subject.
Peter, thank you, Peter, coming in from the East Coast. Sorry for stealing your evening, but we appreciate it, sir.
Oh, it's my pleasure. This is what I miss about being hung up at home.
Right on. Well, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Bye.